Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rob's Movie Reviews. This week I'll be wrapping up my 3 video series on the Terminator franchise. This week's video will be about what I consider the weakest of the 3 original installments of the Terminator trilogy. I haven't even gone into anything after the trilogy, and I don't intend to. I really didn't care for anything beyond this point. But the first 3 films were very good, very innovative, exciting, very fun to watch. However, the third film, Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, again, I believe is the weakest installment of the original trilogy. And I believe a lot of that has to do with the fact that James Cameron played a very minor role in the making of this film. He did not direct it. He did not produce it. He merely assisted in writing the screenplay, among other people. So he didn't even have full influence as far as the story itself being told. Now, with that being said, it's still a good movie in its own right. Just when you compare it with the first 2 pictures, it just does not live up to the standard that they set. It is not on par with them. But it is, again, in its own right, a very good movie. Now, this movie stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Claire Danes. It also stars David Andrews and Nick Stahl. The story of the Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. We now see John Connor as an adult. He's in his early 20s. The date that was supposed to be the date of Judgment Day has come and passed. It never happened. But he lives with this constant fear that he's not out of the woods yet, that there's something lurking. He just can't quite put his finger on it, but he just feels like we're not out of the woods on this thing yet. And as it turns out, he's right. He's injured in a motorcycle accident. He doesn't want to go to a doctor because he's been living off the grid for quite a few years now. He doesn't want anybody to know where he is. He doesn't want to be able to be tracked down. So instead of going to see a doctor, he breaks into a veterinarian's facility in the middle of the night and finds some medication to hopefully ward off any infection and the injury that he's received on his leg when he had to lay his motorcycle down. Now, while he's in there doing that, the owner of the veterinary facility, Catherine Brewster, played by Claire Danes, gets an emergency phone call that someone's bringing one of their pets in. She comes into the office. She finds John stealing the drugs. She manages to trick him into going into one of the back rooms, where she shoves him into a steel dog kennel and locks the door to it. Now, in the meantime, while all this has been going on, 2 more Terminators have suddenly appeared in our time. Of course, the T-800, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, appears in the middle of the desert. And this time, a female Terminator has been sent back. I believe she's designated the XT. She's even more advanced than the T-1000 that we saw in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. She is liquid steel again, as he was, but this time around, and I say female Terminator, it's a Terminator but disguised in female form. This Terminator is liquid steel like the T-1000, but this one is even further advanced because it does have some moving parts that can adapt with the molding and shape shifting, and it does have some chemical components to it as well, as we see later on in some of the weaponry that it's equipped with. The mission of the XT is to hunt down, since there is no information available on where John Connor is at this particular point in time, its mission is to hunt down all of his lieutenants, all the main people in his resistance force and to assassinate them. And it sets out about its mission. It ends up showing up at the veterinary facility in search of Catherine Brewster. At around the same time, the T-800 shows up there. It's been tracking John. There's a big showdown between the two Terminators. John and Catherine Brewster are managed to escape with the assistance of the T-800. The XT continues to chase after them. There's this fantastic chase scene that goes on for like 15 minutes. And it involves police cars, it involves tow trucks, ambulances, motorcycles. I mean, it's incredible. The XT has the ability to tap into other machines and thereby take control of them by sending a virus into their onboard computers, giving it complete control. So it has dozens of other vehicles involved in the chase that aren't even manned. There's no one in them. The Terminator's driving them all by remote control. They end up escaping the XT. The XT finds out where Catherine Brewster lived, goes there, finds her fiance, kills him, but assumes his form and joins the police in the search for Catherine as she is trying to escape the area with John Connor and the T-800. Now, the T-800 takes them to a cemetery where they find out that inside of the mausoleum in one of the vaults is a casket that's marked Sarah Connor, but when the T-800 pulls the casket out, they find out it's actually filled with all kinds of heavy weaponry. And as they're gathering these weapons up, the mausoleum is surrounded by the police. They found out where they're at. Catherine Brewster runs out of the mausoleum. She is found by the police. They take her into protective custody while they throw tear gas inside the mausoleum to smoke out the John Connor, and they don't realize, of course, that the T-800 is actually a Terminator. He blasts his way out of there with John inside of a casket. He throws it in the back of a hearse. They drive off. Claire has run off into the cemetery once all the shooting starts. That's when a police car pulls up. She sees her fiance get out of the back of it. As she's running to him and he's walking towards her, he transforms into the female Terminator form. And just before she is terminated, the T-800 and John pull up in a hearse, and the T-800 is able to get off a rocket-propelled grenade to knock out the XT temporarily, giving them long enough to get Claire into the car, or Catherine into the car. Claire Danes is the actress who plays Catherine Brewster. They get her into the hearse. They drive off. They are again pursued by the XT, who jumps on the roof of the hearse, cuts through it with a saw that is built in to her arm. They manage to shake her off the car, escape again. In the process, some of her weaponry is damaged. She has to resort now to using a flamethrower that is built into her systems. They escape to a remote area where the T-800 already knows there is a RV placed there by Sarah Connor filled with even more weapons. It's during their time there that he begins to explain to them the connection that they actually have with one another. That Catherine Brewster, who John knew when he was younger, around the time that the Terminator 2 Judgment Day took place, is actually the daughter of Colonel Robert Brewster, who is in charge of the Skynet program. Unfortunately, even though they destroyed most of the files and the hardware in the second film, they thought they had stopped the Skynet from being built. It was built anyway. It just took longer than originally. It had originally taken place in the past, in the original timeline. This time around, it took longer, but it has come into being. They make the decision that they have to get to Catherine's father and explain to him what's going down so that he can make sure that Skynet never goes online. Now, before they can get to the military base where her father is in control, they have got her father has gotten a call from Washington. There is a severe computer virus that has infected almost the entire civilian internet. It's begun to affect some of the military equipment, and he gets orders from the White House to turn Skynet on, let it go online, let it find this virus and eradicate it. This is against his better judgment because he's still not 100% comfortable with the idea of having a computer completely in charge of everything and having humans removed from the loop. But he can't disobey an order from Washington. The Skynet is turned on. About the time that they turn it on and everything starts to go haywire, the XT shows up, attempts to assassinate Robert Brewster. However, John, Catherine, and the T800 get there at the same time, but not in time to stop Robert Brewster from being shot severely. They stop the XT temporarily again. Robert Brewster has them take him to his office where he has his daughter open up a safe in the office where he has some files and some coordinates and information on how to get to what he calls the computer core that's at a secret air base about 50 miles away from where they're at the time. Now, all the T1s, the original prototypes that would later become the hunter-killer Terminators, the T1s, there's a bunch of them have been built by the military. They're there in a warehouse. Well, they are activated by the XT and they go about killing all the personnel at the base. They're laying waste to everything. John and Catherine barely manage to escape while the T800 is fighting the XT. The T800 sustains severe damage, at which time the XT actually infects him with a computer virus and tries to change his programming so that he can also assist her in terminating John and Catherine. But he is able to override the new orders that have been put into his memory banks, and he helps them escape. They make it to the secret base that her father gave her the coordinates to. As they're opening the blast doors to get behind it where the main core of the Skynet computer is supposedly at, the XT shows up again, but the T800 also shows up at the same time, and there is a final showdown between those two in which they are both completely and utterly destroyed. John and Catherine manage to get through the fire door, through the blast door, seal it. They take an elevator down several hundred feet below the surface of the earth. And when they get down there, they find out that there is no core computer down there. Where her father has sent them to is basically a fallout shelter, and they have to come to grips with the idea that not only her father knew where he was sending them, the T800 also knew where they were being sent. And this is where we have to come to grips with the fact that Judgment Day is inevitable. It is now happening because Skynet is online. The missiles are already being launched against the Soviets, which will undoubtedly cause a retaliation of Soviet missiles to take out all the humans in the on the North American continent, and Judgment Day has begun. And the T-800, knowing that they were going into a fallout shelter instead of to the core computer, allowed it to happen anyway, because by doing so he fulfilled his programming, which was by all means, at all costs, make sure that Catherine Brewster and John Connor survive. And this is when we start hearing all the civil defense radios coming on, and they're asking for help. And John gets on and identifies himself, and we are left with the imagery of the beginning of the war between the machines and the human race. And that is the story of Terminator 3. Now, like I said, this film really lacks in comparison to the first two, because it was not completely written by James Cameron. It wasn't produced or directed by him. But putting that aside, it is a good film. Claire Danes is good in the role of Catherine Brewster, as is Nick Stahl in the role of John Connor. The problem is there's not a lot of chemistry between the two. So it's kind of awkward. It doesn't really flow real well between the two of them. It doesn't really work. And that's bad, because we find out that Catherine will eventually be John's wife in the future. And for them to not have any chemistry, it just makes it hard to see those two as a couple. David Andrews, a good veteran actor, he plays the role of Robert Brewster, Colonel Robert Brewster. He does a great job. Arnold, once again, is absolutely fabulous as the T-800. He just gets better with each film. It's a shame that probably his best performance was in the weakest of the three films. And then we have Kristanna Loken, who plays the female version of the XT Terminator. She does a great job. She's very convincing, very menacing. And overall, it's a really good film. It's not a bad wrap-up to the Terminator trilogy. It just was a little bit of a disappointment, because like I've said multiple times already, it just doesn't quite live up to the original films. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this 3-video series on the Terminator trilogy, and I hope that you will be back next week when I review another movie. And until then, you all take care.